Good evening, everyone, live and online. So just in order to avoid plagiarizing, everything I say is based on the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Zobin, Hirsch, and the Malbim, largely. And I'll try and quote them each at the relevant juncture, but if I ever forget, those are the three mafarshim that I've really been using for this mini-series. And as I was also just saying before I was recorded, I'm struggling a bit with the balance of trying to draw out the big themes and not overly get caught up in each pasuk, but we do have to learn some of the psukim. My aim is on this year to get through the first 6 or ideally 7 psukim, because those are the introductory psukim that explain the purpose of the book. And the rest of the sefer then is the sefer itself, and then maybe I'll try and switch to drawing out the big themes. But for these psukim, I want to learn what the psukim actually say. So in pasuk base, in pasuk aleph, and base, which we discussed last week, the Vilna Gaon explains that Shlomo, the author of Koheles, of Mishley, is defining, in order to understand anything, you need to know its form and its material and the intention and the goal and the author, the worker. And we discussed that last week. And then he spoke about the Shlomo sort of gives himself 3 titles. He's Shlomo, he's Ben David, and he's Melech Yisrael. And again, we discussed that last week. This week, we're going to look at pasuk base, where he talks about the purpose of the book of the Sefer, and he says it's lodas chochma u'musa lahovin imrei bina. It's to know chochma and musa, and to understand imrei bina, works of insight, works of bina, of havana, of understanding. So the Sefer has 3 goals: chochma, wisdom; musa, rebuke or ethical development; and imrei bina, words of understanding. And the Vilna Gaon, which we touched on last week, quite literally says the book is divided up into these 3 sections. And I printed that at the top of the comments of the Gaon this week. The first 3 bullet points in the handout sheet. By the way, I will post again for those who have joined later. I will post the link to the handout sheet and also post it on the YouTube recording. If you just click on the link, you will see the Vilna Gaon. So the first 3 dots, he says, the first section of the book is on Chochmah, the second section of the book is on Musa, and the third section of the book is on Torah, which is Imrei Bina, words of understanding. And he in the brackets, I added from the student of the Gaon how he works that out with chapters, that chapter 1 to 9 is Chochmah, 10 to 24 is Musa, and 24 to the end is Torah. So that's the structure of the work. And it's nice to see it as a structured work, because as we were just saying before the recording started, one of the challenges of Mishley is that it just seems to be a scattering of very apposite and important one-liners, but it's very hard to sort of draw out what the theme is. So this is the structure of the work. Now, the Vilna Gaon now spends some time defining Chochmah, Musa, and Imrei Bina, and I do want us to spend some time talking about this, because these are important ideas. And the basic message that the Vilna Gaon says is he links this to the 3 sephiros, or 3 midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which are associated with wisdom, which we know from Tefillah, which we know from in the building of the Mishkan, when Moshe is advised which sort of figures to choose for the project of building the Mishkan. There's 3 words in Hebrew, basically 3 categories of intelligence: Chochmah, Bina, and Das. So we use them in our Tefillah, depending on which nusach exactly you daven in Atachonin, Adam Das, and Lamin Leinish Binach, and in Mitzvah Deo, Bina, Vahaskel. So there's these three phrases: Chochmah, Bina, and Das. There's it's mentioned in the Torah when Moshe actually chooses a successor. He's told to choose someone that has Chacham v'Novon, someone who has Chachma and who has wisdom and has Das. And the Vilna Gaon here allies it to these 3 things. And basically he says that Chachma is wisdom. Wisdom is that which we receive from something outside ourselves, or that which is beyond ourselves. Now, Rashi on the word Chachma says it's something which is Masha Adam Makabel Mi Rabbi, that which you receive from a teacher. But the Vilna Gaon explains it means anything which is input from outside yourself. You always have to start off with data. And you have to be a wise person. You need to accumulate and collect this information, this wisdom. And by definition, the data always comes out of from outside yourself. It can be data or information or wisdom that's taught to you by someone, or it can be that your senses perceive. But it's always something that's beyond. Chachma is always something that's external to yourself and beyond yourself by definition. And we always have to start off with things which are beyond ourselves, which are external to ourselves. We can't just have within ourselves our own inner resources. People often talk about inner knowledge or inner certainty, but in a sense that's an illusion, because you first have to start off with material from outside. Even our very ability to think and to reason, in a sense, is something that we perceive as coming from beyond ourselves. Just by developing an existence and having people speak to us. Through that we learn language, through that we learn thought patterns. So we always start off with that which is beyond ourselves. There's also a degree, and those who come to my Sunday morning will recognize this, there's a degree to which these things are axiomatic. They're in a sense unprovable. You have to start off with some data which is just almost accepted as being part of the fabric of reality that just exists in how the world is. And by definition, we can't explain everything about how the world is, because with the very tools we use to explain it are not going to be explicable. So, for example, the rules of logic, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, you can't prove, because what tools would you use to prove it other than logic itself? So there's always something beyond ourselves, which is what we need to start with. And this is the concept of Chachma. Bina is Mevin Dava Mitoich Dava, understanding and drawing out insight from one thing from something else. It may be etymologically linked to the word binyan, to build. So bina is when I build something from something else. So I've learned the principles, the core ideas, but now I need to draw out more from them. I need to consider the implications, how to apply it, how to put it into practice. That's the concept of bina. And the Vilna Gaon links this to almost three parts of our psyche. He says Chachma is linked to our mind, to our moach, our brain. Bina is linked to Maisa, to the world of Asiya, to the world of doing. Binyan, to build something out of it. I've got the abstract idea, but now I need to know what to do with it. And in the middle, that which links the two is da'as, is my own internalization of the idea. Because if I have chokhmah, I have wisdom, I've received information, and maybe in English we translate wisdom, but these are all just translations, perhaps they're poor translations. Chokhmah is that which I've received from outside myself, information and so on. I now need to integrate that with myself. It has to become part of me. I have to absorb it, and that is how I align myself with this information that I've received, and that's the world of Musa. That's the world of steering myself and aligning myself and apportioning how I operate. Musa, the literal meaning of the word Musa is rebuke. It may be linked to the word liyaseh, to afflict, because it's a control, a self-control. It may be linked to the word asur, bound, something which is forbidden, is tied up. A prisoner is an asir. We say matir asurim in the bracha, someone who frees that which is bound up. Not matir asurim, he who allows that which is forbidden. So there's issa and heta, that which is unbound and allowed, and issa is that which is bound. So musa means binding and constraining and restricting and rebuking and suffering. It's linked to self-control and self-discipline and apportionment of self. So this in turn is linked to the concept of a midah. A midah is a measure. A person who absorbs chokhmah and wants to align themselves with it has to act in a measured manner, has to work out how to apportion and allocate themselves. No quality within a human being is negative in and of in itself. It has to now be applied and apportioned correctly. That's why when we talk about someone having good midot, what we mean is they're able to apply and allocate their inner life in a sort of appropriate way. Of famously, the Rambam writes of the golden mean. We may think generosity is a good middle, but actually generosity is not necessarily a good middle. If you're overly generous in a manner that bankrupts yourself in a proliferate manner, then that's clearly not a good middle. We may think that miserliness is a bad quality, but actually being careful can be a good quality. But so over miserly, over generous isn't sensible. You have to choose a middle path in which you're responsible with your income. Similarly, laziness and activism. We may think laziness is a bad quality. It is, but activism also can be an overly bad quality. If you are over controlling and over dominant and overexert yourself, so you need to choose a middle path. And this is the famous golden mean of the Rambam in so many areas. So this is midas, which is linked to Musa and linked to da'as, the inner knowledge. Da'as is that which becomes connected and defines me and intimate to me. Das is actually more like the self-knowledge that we were speaking about earlier. You can't just suffice in self-knowledge. No one can have an inner knowledge unless they're first absorbed chokhmah, data, information, wisdom. If you don't have that information, on what basis are you operating? You need to accept the universe for what it is, reality, the fabric of reality for what it is. Then that's in the mind. Then you've got das, which is in the realm of midas or personality, how I integrate it with myself. And then you've got Maaser, which is the Imre Bina, the application of this into the real world. This is how the Vilna Gaon aligns these three things. So I'll come to the moment, David. So what he's saying is the purpose of this book is Lodas, to know, Chokhmah, wisdom. I'm going to give you information. That's the first part of the book. Musa, rebuke or alignment of your personality and integration, the second part of the book. And the final section is Lahovin Imri Bina, to understand words of insight or building, Mevin Tova Mater Tova, to draw out how to practically live based on that, which is Torah, which tells us how we're actually practically meant to live. Etymology of the word das always has associated with it connection and intimacy. A marital relationship is described as das, to know, like the biblical knowing. Adam Yodas Chava, right? Adam knew Eve, knew Chava. New means in terms of intimate connection, because that's what a relationship should become. It should become a sort of merging of selves and a new sense of self-identity. So it does, when you say that you know something, Yediyah, you don't just mean you've received wisdom, but you mean it's become part of who you are. If I tell you a piece of information that you've been told is incorrect, so you fine, okay, it's incorrect, you adjust your idea. If it's become your idea, if it's become molded your worldview and how you are, it's traumatic when you find out it's untrue, because it's become a knowledge that you've had. It's not just a piece of information. If you find out somebody you've heard of in the abstract and you've had information about, and you find out that they're a fraud or a problematic person, okay, I've got a piece of knowledge about them. It's disappointing. If this is someone I know, someone I connect with, then it's earth-shattering. It sort of changes my sense of identity. Sorry, David. You.
To me, it seems that the Vilna Gaon's categorization is a bit counterintuitive. Chokhmah, we talk about Chazal and Chachamim.
Yes.
And one envisages that not just people who have learned things, but people who have some inherent quality to apply it. If we take a very topic of this week's segment between Korach and Moshe,
yes,
Moshe knew how to correctly apply all the knowledge.
Yes.
Korach didn't.
So the reason why we actually call Chachamim, I know in the sort of modern parlance, we've shifted a bit the meanings, but this aspect, by the way, of what the Gaon is saying is very classic. It's accepted by all the Mefarshim, basically. So as I said, Rashi says Chachma and so on. The reason why the sages were called the sages, the Chazal, is because they were receivers of Torah Sheba'al Peh, of inherited wisdom. Data doesn't just mean, there is a wisdom in receiving information. Not everyone is capable of receiving information accurately and correctly. It doesn't just mean I tell you a piece of information that, 3 + 2 is 5, or tigers are from the cat family. You do have to receive that information. You have to acquire it or take it. You have to understand it in the sense of it has to integrate and integrate into a intellectual faculty. It's the most cerebral, the Vilna Gaon says, of all of them, but in the sense that I'm receiving in my mind, but I'm not yet building anything from it, which is Bina and understanding, and I'm not yet applying it to reallocate myself, which is Midas and Musa. So in that sense, I'm talking about receiving. If it doesn't just mean tape recording, because then I've just memorized it. It does mean that I've understood it in the sense of I've got that information and it makes sense to me and it's absorbed in me, but it hasn't yet molded my worldview. It hasn't yet changed and certainly hasn't yet changed how I operate.
But, yeah. I mean, you have to know how to apply. I mean, Shlomo HaMelech, who was the epitome of Chokhmah,
yes,
he could make judgments. It wasn't just he knew everything.
So in this work, he's writing this as a mature Mishloma, and that's exactly what he's saying. he says, I had much chokhmah. Remember now the words from Koheles. He says, I had all this chokhmah, and I realized it didn't bring me happiness. I went to enjoy life, and so on. So he's now saying, life starts at chokhmah, but then it has to go on. The reason why we learn this introduction, by the way, is not just a piece of academic exercise to understand the structure of Mishley. I want us to, Shlomo is saying this for a reason. He's saying when you get a new piece of information, say, okay, I've got the new piece of information, then ask yourself, how do I align myself with that? That's the Musa. And then ask yourself, what can I build with it? How can I either build the world or build myself? That's the Imre Bina. That's the Torah of it. That's the mitzvah of it, the tzivoi of it, the instruction that emerges from it. The Gaon explains that Chochmah and Musa don't contain instruction in them. It's Bina that contains the ought, the should that emerges from it. Chochmah is just the reality of the fabric of this universe, knowing the fabric of the universe. Bina Musa is now aligning myself with it. If I want to succeed and function, I need to be aligned with how the world is. Bina, then, the third stage is Imre Bina, which is where Torah starts, is, okay, now do something with it. Build the world with it. That's where mitzvahs, that's the realm of mitzvahs. Again, let's just have a look. Let's not yet look at the Vilna Gaon inside, because I just want to sort of take this a little bit further. The Vilna Gaon then says in the in the next section, he talks about 3 types of secholim, and again, here let's have a look at the penultimate bullet points on the handout sheet that I gave out. He says, these 3 which we've just discussed, they parallel 3 secholim, 3 intellectual faculties. Do you have that, David? Because I know you're using the sheet from last time. Yeah. But on your sheet it's different, yeah. Here, you can take this one. David's got the sheet from last week. Yeah, fine. Okay, yeah. Okay. So, Ve'ela Shlosha, he says, again, I'm learning this because the Vilna Gaon is telling us this for a reason, and I hope this gives insight into how we operate and things we need to think about. Seichel ha'iyuni, and again, let me say this Vilna Gaon outside, and then we'll read it inside, because I just want to avoid confusion. The Vilna Gaon says there's 3 types of intellectual faculty. In education, when I learned pedagogy and education as a teacher, nowadays they talk about multiple intelligences. Gardner, those who are interested in educational psychology, we often talk about someone intelligent or not intelligent. That's a mistake. There's multiple types of intelligences. We're in football season now, so we often are sort of we're fairly bookish people, and so on. We might think about a footballer who can't necessarily form a super coherent sentence or engage in high level mathematical reasoning or poetry, and we might be tempted to say, he's a great footballer, but he's not very intelligent. But actually, what do we mean by intelligence? It's someone who's capable of holding in their head the position of 22 people at any time, and the picture of the trajectory of the ball, and how to strategically think about that whole place. It's enormous intellectual faculty. It's ridiculous to think about it as just being, they've got good reflexes and good athletic performance. It's a multiple intelligence. It's a different type of intelligence. So we're often quite snobbish and narrow, judgmental and narrow-minded in how we think about intelligence. So the Vilna Gaon, who knew a thing or two about thought, perhaps considered the greatest Gaon of 500 years of Jewish history. He says there's 3 sorts of secholim that he's interested in here. He says there's seichel ha'iyuni. Iyun means investigative or research or in-depth wisdom, or seichel, intelligence is a better translation. Seichel ha'machshava, which is thought and based intelligence, and seichel ha'masa, which is applied or actualized intelligence. So. And he then defines them, and he says Seichel Yoni is the ability to research the world. And this is a bit of an answer to your question when you said that surely Chochmah doesn't just mean knowing data. A researcher is researching the wisdom of the world. If you are a scientist, you're not really able to necessarily ask yourself at this stage, why is something like it is? but you're trying to understand what is the world? What world do we live in? And the Vilna Gaon says here two examples. He says it's Behilach HaKochavim, that the path of the stars, in other words, astronomy, science, and Merkava, the Kabbalistic secrets of how Hashem runs the world. In other words, just the facts of what the world is. So if you're engaged in science and research, it will be it's certainly in the times of the Gaon, if you ask them, the peak of science maybe was the astronomy, the path of the planets. So they were beginning to develop rules. We're talking about the 1700s, quite sophisticated rules of understanding of the patterns of the planets and so on. But you were absorbing it and understanding the rules, the mathematical formula that allocate it. Didn't really understand why it was like that. Okay, nowadays, do we understand why it's like that? Well, in a sense, yes, because we now understand the rules of gravity and that which makes the paths of the stars the way they are. But even then, if we ask ourselves, and why is the rule of gravity like that? We still don't have an answer to that. Imagine a imaginary world where we hit the year 2300 and they've all worked out all the rules of science, and we're going to shut down the science labs because we worked everything out. We can explain everything, other than one little question that remains, which is, and why are the rules of science the way they are? And then you need to start again, right? The rules about rules, the meta rules. So the Seichel Hiyuni is always involves a degree of just accepting the external wisdom without being able to ultimately ask the why about it. It's receiving that which is beyond oneself. And that can be, therefore, the secrets of Kabbalah and how Hashem runs the world. And it can be the secrets of science, which is, I guess, a different way of how Hashem runs the world. But it's always that which is beyond oneself. Then there's Seichel HaMachshava, which he calls the wisdom of thought. This is how you align yourself with it, how to run your life with midot. Okay, I've now understood something about science or about spiritual reality. How am I going to allocate myself? How am I going to allocate resources accordingly? External resources, financial resources, or internal resources? That's what we said midot means, which is my qualities, my attributes, my personality. How do I run my life accordingly? How do I direct myself? The language of the Vilna Gaon is lahanhig et atzmo b'midos. This is lahanhig, to direct yourself, to be manhig yourself. And the final thing is seichel hamaseh. How do I actually live? So not the internal changes I'm making in myself, but then how do I apply this in the real world? What do I actually do? Now you may say, well, surely what you actually do, again, just try and bring this out. Surely what you actually do is different, is the same as the midot that you've put in yourself, which in turn is the same as the conceptual ideas that you absorbed. But it's not true. It can often be the opposite. So an example, I may have created in myself midos of kindness. But maybe the practical application of the midah of kindness is I need to tell my child, no, you can't have this, because it wouldn't be good for them to have it. So the practical application of a midah or an idea can be the very opposite of how the idea looks. Again, remember, practical application is what the Vilna Gaon called bina, understanding, meivin dovim dovim, building something out, something else, linked to the words boine, building, binyan, a building. Let me maybe just try and explain this a little more fully. We say in the Chadodi, stop ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. That which is at the end of action is at the beginning in thought. So the Vilna Gaon explains what this means. He says, imagine you set out to build yourself a new house. You've got a large sum of money. You've been fortunate in the lottery or in your business life, and you have a large sum of money, and you want to build a dream home. So you start off by dreaming a dream. So you have a vision of what the home I wanted to place of great aesthetic beauty and delight and comfort and luxury and so on. It's a very abstract idea. I then now need to narrow it down a little bit more practically. Okay, so it's going to have a pool room and a swimming pool, and it's going to have a library and a theatre, and it's going to have 14 bedrooms, and it'll have the servants' quarters and several living rooms and so on. So I'm now sort of making it a little bit more concrete and real. Okay, but now I need to actually think about a plan. So how's that going to be laid out? How's that going to be structured? How can I fit all the things? I need to start thinking about resources. So I now get in not just an architect who's laid out the plan, but the quantity surveyor who works out how many girders of steel and tons of concrete I need in order to build this. Okay, so there's an order in the world of thought, machshava, which goes from the vision, the highest end vision, through to nuts and bolts, which ultimately get down to girders of steel and concrete. I now begin building. The builder goes in the opposite order. They start off with actually buying the girders and the steel and the concrete. They then begin structuring them in line with the architect's plan. And ultimately, in the real world, I now end up with my house, which has the swimming pool and billiards room and theatre and the bedrooms and everything else that I dreamt about. So in the world of Asiya, I've gone in the reverse order. Sof Maaseh, the final act, is what was Machshava Tchila. But the final act I get is not the girders and the concrete and the foundations being laid and the mud and the so on, which in the world of Maaseh was the first thing. But the final act I get is what I dreamt about right at the beginning, which was in thought my first machshava. So are you with me in this? There's an asymmetry. So this is the Vilna's Gaon's part over here, that seichel maaseh is a very different sort of seichel. It can often appear to be the exact opposite of what seichel iyuni is, what in-depth academic ideas are, or even midas, how the midas are. So again, we're learning this because the Vilna Gaon wants us to draw. Shlomo wrote this for a reason. He wants us to draw practical application for this. Everything you learn or absorb or think about, always ask yourselves: is this seichel iyuni? Is this academic knowledge? But how do I align myself with this? How does it impact how I change my inner life? But then I can't just follow my inner life. People often will say I'm following the voice of conscience, my inner reasoning. But one thing, your inner reasoning has to match the external world, the reality of it. And then it has to be applied to Lamaisa. And the application of Lamaisa might be the very opposite order of the Gemara says, you shouldn't be merciful on a cruel person. You may have mercy on a cruel person who's dangerous, but in that act of mercy, you're actually doing an act of cruelty. The practical application of something might mean a person with great kindness may have to do an act of cruelty in order to achieve that which they're achieving. So this is the alignment that the Vilna Gaon gives in these things. He then he then says a final fascinating idea, and this does take us a little bit away from Mishley, but I just want to share it with you because it's so important. He says that seichel iyuni, the sort of abstract ideas of the external world that the world imposes on us and that we can never fully understand, parallels chukim, the realm of Torah, which is a chok. Why is it that in Torah there's things that we can't understand? Because the truth is reality has things we can't understand. There's a spiritual reality that we can't understand, but it is what it is. Then there's mishpat. Mishpat is the world of justice. Mishpat, interestingly, also is what it is. It's in terms of us as human beings, but it also is what it is. It's also part of the fabric of reality. Neither of them contain directly in them a call to action. Then finally, you have mitzvahs, which is the call to action, things I actually need to do, tzivuyim, instructions. And this is what I said that before, that it's really only been on Maven Dover when I start building that there's an actual call to action. One needs to work on chukim. Chukim are the spiritual reality of life. Tumah and Tara, we don't understand. We've got no idea about the reasons of it. We've got Parshas Chukas approaching next week. I have no idea about why something makes me Tomei and why a certain process makes me Tara. It's almost the science of Torah, if you like. It's just the spiritual fabric of reality, which we don't know. It just is what it is. It doesn't contain with it instruction. Meaning to say, in and of in itself, it's just telling me a fact. You're Tomei or Tahor. It's just a reality. Mishpat doesn't contain instruction to it. Mishpat is, for example, ownership. I own this pen. Whether there are laws about stealing or not, whether I can prove my ownership or not prove my ownership, whether you can grab it off me because you're stronger than me or not, whether there's even a law that says lo sigzol, don't steal, or lo signov, or there isn't such a law, it's again a type of reality. It's mishpatim. It's the personal qualities I adopt, the midas I adopt, don't carry within them implications for action. It's just how I am psychologically, how I've made myself. And then finally, there's mitzvahs, which are, okay, now bridge the gap and align the two and make them live up to what these realities are. So let's just very briefly, just so you can navigate the source sheets, but we're not going to go through them in more detail than that. Let's look at the bottom two sets of bullet points. These three, which the Pasuk mentions, of Chachma, Musa, and Imrei Bina. Chachma is wisdom, Musa is rebuke, and Imrei Bina are words of building, words of understanding, when she says the Torah. Parallel Seichel ha'iyuni, the iyun, the in-depth with intelligence faculty, hu b'darkei shamayim, berach kechavim, the Merkava Kodoma, the scientific reality, And spiritual reality. Seichel hamachshava is the thought faculty. That's how you internalize yourself with midot. And Seichel hamasa is hubamasa, is action-based wisdom. Vehim neged, and this parallels chukim or mishpatim or mitzvahs. Chukim heim b'shamayim, chukim are in heaven, the spiritual realities. Mishpatim heim b'eretz, the moral moralities. The mitzvahs heim mechaper shamayim b'eretz. The mitzvahs are linking the two and trying to align the heaven and earth, how we align the two. So this is the reading that the Vilna Gaon has in this pasuk. Again, I want to move this away from the abstract. He says this work I'm giving you is going to have three parts. It's going to have chachma, it's going to have musa, which is your own internal actualization of this, and it's going to have bina, which is the practical implications, how you actually live a life. And in our lives, I think it's a life better lived when one always asks oneself, what's the chachma of this? What's the bina? What's the musa of this? And what's the bina? What can I build out of this? And always ask yourself, which intellectual faculty should I use? And where am I strong and where am I weak? I may be very good at Ian, but very bad at machshava or poor at maser. How can I apply all of this in a real way that's worth living? So that's the pasuk base that the Vilna Gaon as per our reasoning of this. Let's move. Any questions before we move on to pasuk Gimel? Okay, the third pasuk in Mishley now says that lokachas musa haskel, to take musa is a word we're familiar with. Musa is rebuke, as we said, or internal alignment. Haskel means an intelligent musa. And we'll have to work out what exactly that means. Tzedek umishpat umeshorim. Justice, righteousness, and meshorim is yashar, straightness or equity. It's translated over here in the English translation that I put in place. Okay, so here we need to understand what are these qualities. So we've spoken a lot about musa. Musa means internal midot development, but now this musa has to be haskel. It has to be seichel. It has to include with it intelligence. What's the meaning of the word seichel, of intelligence? We spoke before about intellectual faculties and so on. So there's two suggestions put forward as to what the word means. Either it means, well, three suggestions really. Either it means intelligence, that it's got a wisdom to it, or it means successful, it's the correct application of an idea, or it means enlightened. By the way, when the Renaissance and hit the Jewish world, the word that was given to those who brought into enlightenment was maskilim, right? So maskil, right? Maskil. So it might mean enlightened, because illuminated, that may be the etymology of the word. Because someone has intelligence, they can illuminate a situation. That's why the word was chosen. It might mean successful. You find, for example, I think Yosef is called Ishmaskil, a successful person, and it might be intelligence. Those are the meanings that are given to it. So when you apply Musa, you have to apply it intelligently. That means don't just delve into your internal moral compass. People often talk about a moral compass, but check that it actually fits reality. The Meiri, who has a commentary on this, speaks about, he says, okay, you've got an ethical sensibility, but does it now make sense? We spoke already about, am I being kind to a cruel person? Or he says you have to think about halachic reality. If I have ethics which call on me to do hashavas aveda, but the Gemara says if I'm a Kohen and the lost object is inside the cemetery, I can't go into the cemetery to pick it up. So you have to ask yourself halacha and other external factors beyond just the midas. So this is the kachas musa haskel. You have to take musa, but you have to check that it is intelligently applied. This is one way of understanding this this idea of musa haskel. The Malbim, who, as I said, is the second pillar that I'm using in our learning. He says that this concept of haskel over here means, is it illuminated? What am I using to direct myself to rebuke, to improve myself? And here he says there's always two motives of growth in our yiras shamayim, as it were, in our desire to improve. One is yirat ha'onesh, fear of punishment, and the other is what we refer to as yirat haromimut, fear of or awe of that which is elevated. So again, I want to try and take these are terms that we hear floating around all the time, and I'd like to just try and help us understand what they mean, because these are so important in self development. We often in our Judaism have two motives floating around. One is fear of punishment and desire for reward. This is referred to as the lower yira, the lower level of fear. It's a legitimate thing. The Torah indeed tells us about reward and punishment, but it is in the language of Malbim, the unenlightened way of growing. The other meaning of Yirat Shamayim is all of that which is transcendent. I may have mentioned before in this setting, the literal meaning of the word Shamayim, the Radak and others say, we say Yirat Shamayim. What does it mean to say Yirat Shamayim, fear of the heavens? Why do we refer to Hashem as being in Shamayim? Why do we refer to Hashem as being in the heavens? So the literal meaning of the word Shamayim is from the etymology of the word Shom, which means over there. Shamayim is the plural of there. Everything that is there, everything that is beyond. So we refer to the sky as Shamayim because it's never here, it's always there. However far you go, the horizon is always beyond. The skies are always beyond. But we refer to the spiritual realm as also Shamayim because it's transcendent. It's removed from our physical earth, from the physical world within which we live. It's the world of goals, the world of aspiration, the world of achievement. Forgive me if I shared the story before, but the first man in space was... Have I ever said this before? No, I've never said this before, yeah. So I never remember what I've said to this audience or not. Yuri Gagarin, after he came back from space, he was a cosmonaut. He was a Russian astronaut, a cosmonaut. He came back from space and he was quoted widely in the media, said, "I went to the heavens and there is no God." So from which I learned, this was one of my favorite stories, I learned that cosmonauts are not always good theologians, because of course when we refer to Hashem as in the heavens, why do we say he's in the heavens? We mean he's beyond, he's Shom, he's over there, he's transcendent. The better translation of the word Shemayim would mean transcendence, really. It means he creates this physical world, and he creates Shemayim. He creates the world which is Shom, which is over there, which is transcendent, which is beyond. It's always there. It's the goals, it's the aspirations, it's the targets, it's that which we wish to achieve. I later found out that after Yuri Gagarin died and the Iron Curtain fell, they discovered his diaries, and it turned out that he was a closet believer. He was actually a believing Christian, but he realized in Soviet Russia that he had to keep quiet about that. And it turns out this quote was made up by Pravda to make up the quote, from which I learned that not a cosmonaut is always bad theologians, but propagandists are sometimes poor historians. So yes, the quote is too perfect. Yeah, it's a piece of propaganda. Okay, but why do I say this? Because when we refer to Yiras Shamayim, what does it mean to be Yiras Shamayim? Yiras Shamayim means not fear of punishment, but fear of transcendence. That means to say, I realize that which is transcendent and beyond, and not just the physical, is precious, it's valuable, it's fragile, it's sensitive. I'm in awe of it. I recognize that Hashem is beyond. I recognize my spiritual nature is transcendent and beyond, and I don't want to lose it. So there's two motives for that which pushes us to adopt Musa, to rebuke ourselves. One can be a spiritual type of self-interest, and that's not a bad thing. If I don't develop myself in Musa, my relationships are going to be poor. If I always allow my ego to get in the way of myself, I'm not going to have a great marriage, I'm not going to have great relationships with my kids, I'm not going to be popular amongst my friends, and I'm going to get punished by God. So one motive of Musa is the lower form of Yirat Shamayim, fear of punishment. I know that I need to develop myself, my midot, in order to function effectively. We spoke about the Rambam's golden means. If I don't work out my midot and I end up super miserly or over generous, and I'm not there in the middle, I'm just not going to live a successful life. I won't be able to function. The higher level of Yirat Shamayim is awe of that transcendence. I'm in awe of the transcendent. I recognize there is transcendence. Hashem grants to us the possibility of ascending to the heavens, of being a transcendent being, of being an elevated person who isn't mired in the here and the now and the material. And I develop myself because I want to achieve that quality. So this is how the Malbim translates Musa Haskel, enlightened self-development, not the mundane self-development of the lower form of Yirat Shamayim, but the enlightened self-development of the high form of Yirat Shamayim. Now, the Vilna Gaon translates Musa Haskel as successful Musa, meaning one which is applied and apportioned properly, and that's the continuation of the pasuk, Tzedek, Mishpat, and Meishorim. So we're here on pasuk 3. Tzedek is we often talk about tzedakah as charity. It's an interesting thing because the literal meaning words of tzedek is righteousness, that which is right, right? So what is tzedakah? Is tzedakah an obligation? Is it a chiyuv? Is it righteousness? How does it differ from mishpat? Mishpat is justice. Right, tzedek, tidov, you should surely pursue justice. We often conflate the words in English, we mistranslate them. And the answer is that mishpat is that which is demandable in court, that which you could sue someone for in court. You can't sue someone for tzedakah. But tzedakah, in our thinking, isn't just generosity. There is an obligation to it. It's in modern language, you might say it's a social justice. It's a type of justice. It's not justice in which you can take me to court for, in which I owe you money, but it's a justice in the sense that it's making the world fairer and making the world more looking. There's an injustice in a poor person suffering and starving. That's unjust. Why should that happen? It's wrong. I have an obligation to fix it. But the obligation is a moral obligation, obligation of generosity, not a financial or legal obligation. So tzedek is the act of going beyond myself. Tzedek is a righteousness, of a charitable righteousness, which is going beyond myself. You could think of it as beyond the letter of the law. You could think of it as charity. Justice, mishpat, is judgment, is what am I obligated to following the exact letter of the law, that which can be taken in court. And mishorim, that which is straight, is finding the balance between the two, is the allocation between the two. And finding the balance between, okay, how much do I go beyond myself? How much do I engage in tzedakah? How much do I take upon myself the weight, the moral responsibility of the world? But I can't fix everything that's in the world. Ultimately, I need to live my life in mishpat. I need to, there is concepts of ownership and property and legal obligations. So mishorim is yashar, is the balance between the two. And this is, says Shlomo, is the purpose of this book, to get a proper and appropriate mix between these qualities that exist. Okay. So what we've said in Pasuk Gimel is that in Pasuk Base we said that the work has three purposes: Chochmah, Musa, and Bina, and we discussed those ideas. In Pasuk Gimel, we said make sure that your Musa, your self-development, is Haskel. What does Haskel mean? Enlightened. You develop yourself not just for self-interested purposes of fear of punishment or suffering. You do need to have good midot to avoid suffering, but develop yourself for enlightened reasons, for elevated reasons, because of the desire for transcendence. That's one interpretation, the Malbim. Or develop yourself in a successful way. Make sure your Musa is successful. How do you make sure it's successful? By trying to balance tzedakah, mishpat, and meishorim. Again, Shlomo is pushing us here to ask ourselves these questions. What pushes me in my Judaism? What pushes me in my desire for self-development? Is it because I'm seeking transcendence, or is it because I'm afraid of the consequences? Neither are bad. They're both appropriate. But can I be more enlightened in how I'm developing myself? And number two, tzedek, mishpat, meishorim. Always ask yourself: is this an act of generosity, of going beyond? Of tzedek, there's a justice to it, so trying to make the world a more just place. Mishpat, which is the letter of the law, and meishorim, trying to find the balance of living a straight life, which is the balance between all of these. Yes.
I understand the kind of the setting out what of the various purposes of Mishlei. Why did Shlomo write Mishlei?
It seems he. Okay, so this is what these psukim are for. It seems he felt that there were lessons of wisdom, self-improvement, and and action that he could teach. Now, you may say, why is it his job to teach it? Surely we have the Torah. And the answer to that is what we said in last year, that Chazal say all of Nevi'im and Kesufim are given on Har Sinai, along with Mishnah, Gemara, and everything else. And we explained that doesn't mean that on Har Sinai Moshe was taught. Rabbi Kiva said this, or Abai and Rava said that, in the realm of halacha. It means that inherent in Torah all these ideas, but then it was the job of the Poskim to flesh out these ideas. The Nevi'im and Kesuvim are also fleshing out ideas of Torah. So here Shlomo is doing in the ethical realm that which in some ways Rav and Abai are doing in the halachic and legal realm. So Shlomo is saying, I have again, this is ksubim. So this is, in one understanding, at least how the Rambam understands it, this is the wisdom of Shlomo, inspired by the light of Ruach HaKodesh, of divine illumination. But it's Chochma Shlomo. These are the words of Shlomo. Mishlei Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael. These are the Mashalim of Shlomo. And what Shlomo is going to argue in this book is that if you want to develop, you need to seek out the Mashalim, the parables of life. Shlomo sees his job as aligning the heavens and the earth. He's someone who's accumulated everything physical that you can. And he says, I want to show you that out of all of that emerges self-development and self-improvement. And that's the concept of a moshel, which we'll come to later. Now, every moshel and nimshel, every parable and interpretation, the reason you use a moshel is because it helps someone understand something. You're taking something relatable and you're trying to make it help them understand something beyond. I gave the moshel last week to help us understand the moshel of a moshel, to help us understand what a moshel is, of a child who says, what's going on in Crimea and Ukraine? A 4-year-old asks it. So the moshel you might give is, it's like when you're in playgroup and your friend grabs your toy train. So you're giving them something relatable to themselves, because they can't understand the idea of an army and a country being grabbed, but they can understand the idea of an individual grabbing a toy train. So Shlomo is saying, I want to train you in self-development, and I want you to see how life, if you look at life properly, it can give you insight into how things are meant to be lived. By the way, the Bali Musa lived, and the Hasidim built this into a fact of life, right? They went through life, and out of everything they learned. There's a famous story with Rabbi Salanta, in which he sees a shoemaker staying up late at night, working in the flickering candle at night, preparing the shoes. And he says to him, "Why are you working so late?" And he said to him, while the candle burns, work can still be done. And he hears from that this sort of Musa idea that when the light's still burning, don't stop, it can be dark at night. With the candle still burning, why waste a moment of illumination? Do things with it. So this idea of being able to wander through life and draw the mashalim of life is important. And here in this introduction, Shlomo is really giving us the key things. The first pasuk base told us, think always in your life about Chochmah, Musa, and Imre Bina. What's the wisdom in this? The information, the insight, the sort of idea, the Musa, the way I align myself with it, the way I make it part of myself, and what's the practical application that comes out of it. I don't know if one can live life when one's always doing it, because it would be difficult. But a great person lives life where every time something happens, they always ask themselves, what's the wisdom I just got from this? What's the inner way I can integrate that into myself and how I align myself, and what's the practical application that I can give for this? This is what Shlomo's arguing. Does that answer your? Dan, you're looking hesitant.
Shlomo HaMelech write Mishlei what saved his life?
We're told it's at the end. Yes.
So was that because Shlomo HaMelech was kind of dispensing wisdom and throughout his life, and people would come to him, I think, for that guidance. So was there therefore a motivation at the end of his life, actually accumulating all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So
you're going to put his assistance with Mishlei.
That's exactly what's going on. Yes. So for those online, Dan was just saying, Shlomo spent his life guiding people, giving judgments and so on. And now he's booking things, bringing it. We mentioned last week again that Shlomo. We started with the story in Malachim of Shlomo becoming the wisest of all people. He's a wisdom seeker. He has this dream. We don't know exactly what the dream means, but it's some form of dream where Hashem says to him, what do you want? Wealth, long life, power. And he says, I want wisdom. And Hashem says, great, that's the best answer. Now you're going to get everything, because wisdom brings you everything. He then writes his Shiurim, Koheles, and Mishley. They all are quite earthy books. They all are about connecting the spiritual and the physical. Shiurim uses the wisdom, the metaphor of a relationship, a romantic relationship, a loving relationship, to be a metaphor of how we connect to Hashem. Koheles is Shlomo as bitter and cynical about physical pleasure and wealth and so on. And Mishley is his answer to this, which is actually out of all that wealth and things you can. With Koheles, you're left with a very important first stage. There's an argument in Chazal about the order, by the way, but certainly Mishley is not his first book. It's either his second or his third. Is his final conclusion Koheles, Havel Havolim, all that matters is Yiras Shemaim, or is there a deeper conclusion than that, which is All that matters, Yerushalayim, is stage one. So I'm rejecting my party life and all the experiences I had, but I can now see that all that wisdom can then be used for something, which is everything is a mashal for seeing something more deeper and profound. In answer to the other question about Shlomo and his gift as a king, this is what the Vilna Gaon opened with. He says, who are these Mashalim of? They are Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael. I am Shlomo, I have Chochmah, I'm the wisest person. I'm Ben David. Ben David is the Baal Musa par excellence. He's the person who's molded themselves into being the most pious individual. He wrote the soaring, lofting spirituality of Tehillim. And I'm Melech Yisrael. And therefore, I've seen it all. I'm a king. I've seen it all. I've done it all. I've accumulated wisdom. The Malbim says I've had the opportunity of doing social experiments. When I mess up with my society policy, I've actually lived society. I've been able to direct it. So that's what gives me this quality of being able to do this. Okay, so this is the Vilna Gaon on these words. In the interest of time, okay, let's just try and go through at least. I'm going to just try and do another. We'll see. We're not going to get everything done that I wanted to do today, but let's just try and do one more pasuk. Los seis. Is this okay? Everyone's okay. Los seis. So we're now up to pasuk 4. Los seis lefasoim arma, to give simpletons cunning. Lena da'as umazima, and to give a lad knowledge and design. Let's translate that as. I'm looking at pasuk, so I'm not using the source sheet myself. Discretion, okay, that's what you're talking. Yes, the truth, I took these translations off Machon Mamre, which uses, I think, the King James Bible. So the translation is only approximate. Okay, Los Seis Fasoim Arma. So Shlomo identifies now there's two reasons why people, two fixable reasons why people don't act with wisdom. Later on, he's going to talk about other reasons why people don't act with wisdom. But there's two fixable reasons why people don't act with wisdom. Either they are a pessi is a simpleton, or they are a nar, they're a lad. They simply haven't accumulated wisdom. Now, later on in Koheles, Shlomo is going to talk about other types of characters who are foolish. He'll talk about a late, for example. A late is a scoffer. Or a fool. A lot of Mishlei is going to talk about different forms of ignorance. Unfortunately, Shlomo's conclusion is going to be that there are forms of ignorance where an outsider can't fix them. And therefore, Mishlei, you have to open yourself up. So here the pasuk begins, latet, to give. This is about giving a pessi as a simpleton cunning, and giving a nar, a lad who's ignorant, das or mazima. If, however, you're ignorant because you are a late, you're a scoffer, for example. A scoffer is someone who refuses to take anything seriously. There's dismissive. There's not much I can do for you. A late is a clown. If you speak seriously to a person about something that matters to you, you're in a relationship and you want to talk to someone about something in the relationship that matters, or you've got a colleague or a friend and they've hurt you, and everything is jokey. You can't, they're not taking it seriously. They're not willing to give weight. You can't get through to them. They have to wake up and realize life is serious. So Shlomo here says, and he'll speak later about the lates and the Ksila and other sorts of people. He says, for now, I'm addressing two sorts of people. A pessi is, the literal meaning of the word pessi, by the way, is, you'll have met this word by Shlomo P2 Hashem, it's also someone who is seduced that's referred to in the Torah as a pessi. The pasuk talks about a child who is seduced by an adult in terms of immorality and so on. A pessi is someone who is seduced. They take things on face value. It doesn't mean someone, this simple person doesn't mean they have a low IQ or a higher IQ. They're not digging deeper. They believe everything they're told. The pessi believes everything they're told. So they don't probe deeper. So the pessi needs armor. Armor means cunning. By the way, armor is often used as in a negative sense. The nochosh is described as arum, as cunning. A cunning person tries to persuade people and trick people. A cunning person tries to persuade a pessi, seduce Pasoim, to part with their wealth or their property or behave immorally, or whatever it may be. That is the aim of the seducer. So here Shlomo says the aim is loseis. I want to give this to you, and what I want to give you is to this person who's a Pesi, who looks at things on surface value. I want to give you cunning. In other words, the whole point of my Sefer Mishley is understand that reality needs to be probed more deeply. It imposes on external reality, imposes on us Musa obligations. We have to align ourselves to it. And Bina, things we need to build, there's things we need to do. The Pesi just takes things at face value. Let me just give a very trivial example. Someone gets home and their spouse says, the house is such a mess. Yeah, it's such a mess. So that's the Pesi. They're just saying on face value. I've just been given a piece of information. A colleague, a friend says to you, I feel you never give me quality time. You never listen to me. You space out whenever I'm talking. Okay, like it's just a fact. It's not hearing that behind that fact lies something deeper. Now do something about it. Align yourself to it. Change something to it. So the Pesi is vulnerable because they just take things on face value. That the Pesi needs armor. They need cunning. The Na, the lad, in other words, the person who's just missing information, needs da'as and mezima. Das is inner knowledge, as we've already expressed, and mezima means design. They need direction and planning. The etymology you may be familiar with is Dayan Zobin, for example. Again, it's used in a negative concept that comes there. The plotting witnesses who plot a false witness. So hazama is the passage says, you should do to them kasher, kasher zomam, as they plotted to do. So the na needs direction. They need a clarification of a goal, an external goal, and they need das, which is inner knowledge. So Shlomo is also saying that this book is going to speak to us about direction and knowledge. Again, all I would say on a practical level over this is ask yourself, what are the areas where I'm a Pesi, where there are things going on and I'm not asking myself, what's happening deeper? What is this calling on me to do? And where are the areas in which I'm a Na, in which I lack the knowledge? So we all have areas in which we're a Na, in which we lack knowledge. If you have a legal issue, consult a lawyer. You don't know about it. If you have a medical issue, consult a doctor. If you have a halakhic issue, speak to ask a shayla. Don't assume in life that you have that which you don't have. Seek knowledge. That's what this pasuk is saying. Okay, so we're going to stop over here because we've run out of time. And please God, next week I thought we'd finish this week. We'll try and finish what Shlomo is trying to seek out of this. And I'm belaboring this introduction because I think in some ways, when I was sort of preparing for Mishley and trying to think about it, it seemed to me that these psukim were, in a way, the most important psukim because they're telling us at least a goal of what we're meant to be doing, what Shlomo thinks should be our goals in life. Because we'll stop here and please God, we'll carry on next week.
Thank you very much, Dayan Zobin.
Thank you.
The connotation of the English.
Thank you.
Because the Vilna Gaon is not accessible, unfortunately. It's not been translated into English, and it's so important to get its translation. And as the only accessible commentary of a classic commentary is Hirsch's, which I think is very good. Yeah, just stop it here.
Did you take a press?
I haven't seen that. What's the spell time? Yeah.